What if the true origin of humanity isn't Earth, but Mars? Ancient legends and forbidden texts hint at a catastrophic war fought on Mars thousands of years ago, one that turned the red planet into a barren wasteland. Could our distant ancestors have fled here, bringing their technology, myths, and lost knowledge to Earth? The night sky holds a secret we've all felt but never truly faced. Imagine a red world, once alive, with rivers that sang through green valleys and cities that shimmered beneath twin moons. Then fire. A war so vast it scarred a planet, stripping away its air, turning oceans to dust, and leaving only whispers in the void. Now, what if those survivors became the seed of our own civilization, carrying fragments of their lost technology, their myths, and their buried memories to a new home? Close your eyes and drift with me across the gulf of space, back to the war that ended one world and began our own. Mars, the forgotten homeland. The silence of Mars is a lie. That's the first thing you need to understand. When our probes and rovers land on that desolate red expanse, all they hear is the whisper of the thin alien wind, the crackle of cosmic rays, and the grind of their own gears against the rusty dust. But that silence is a tomb. It's the echo of a great scream, a symphony of triumph and tragedy that played out over 12,000 years ago, and it's a sound our senses are simply not equipped to hear. This is not a barren planet, it's a crime scene. A magnificent, glorious crime scene. Let's rewind the clock. Forget the desolate wasteland you know. Erase the images of curiosity's lonely tracks. Instead, paint a new picture in your mind's eye. Imagine a world cradled by a thick, cerulean atmosphere, a sky so deeply blue it put Earth's to shame. In that sky, two small, jagged moons, Phobos and Deimos, whirled in a frenzied dance, their orbits a beautiful, predictable ballet that guided our ancient clocks. Down below, the canyons we now call Valles Marineris were not barren gashes, but vast winding rivers that flowed into a great northern ocean, the Mare Borealis, its surface, a shimmering expanse of liquid water under the sun. Mars was a living, breathing planet, a jewel in the solar system, and we were its heart. Our civilization was not like Earth's. We didn't measure progress in industrial revolutions or technological leaps fueled by fossil fuels. Our advancements were integrated. Our cities weren't built on the surface, but were grown from the very crust of the planet, using geomantic energy and crystalline structures that channeled natural cosmic forces. They were living cities, with spires that touched the ionosphere and buildings that glowed with a soft, bioluminescent light. Our technology was an extension of our biology, not a separate tool. Our vehicles didn't burn fuel. They floated on localized gravitational fields, moving with an elegant, silent grace. We had unlocked the secrets of matter and energy, but we did not conquer them. We communed with them. For millennia, we lived in perfect harmony with our world. Our planet, we called it Ares, the place of beginnings. We were a people of deep spiritual and scientific understanding, our society divided not by wealth or power, but by a form of enlightened specialization. There were the guardians of the ether, who studied the cosmic flows and the stars, mapping not just physical space but the very fabric of existence. There were the artificers of the crust, who communicated with the planet's crystalline core to build our cities and power our lives. And there were the keepers of the law, the historians and philosophers who preserved our history in a vast, interconnected neural network, our collective consciousness. Our society was one of quiet contemplation and shared knowledge. Our greatest achievement wasn't a weapon or a machine, but our ability to exist in a state of tranquil equilibrium. We had solved the problems of disease, hunger, and environmental degradation. Our lives stretched across centuries, giving us the time to master not just one skill, but dozens. We considered ourselves the pinnacle of life in the solar system, a species that had achieved utopia. We were the first children of the sun, and we took our responsibility seriously. We would look out at the solar system from our crystalline towers, observing the nascent, chaotic world of Earth with a mixture of detached curiosity and protective admiration. It was a young, wild world full of potential, a chaotic garden to our manicured paradise. We even sent small, automated probes, what you might call drones or satellites, to monitor its evolution, to make sure it was on a stable path. But even utopia has its fault lines. A shadow began to fall over our peace, a philosophical schism that started as a quiet debate among the guardians of the aether. It was a simple question at first. If we have unlocked the secrets of existence, if we can manipulate reality and live forever, what is our purpose? Should we remain here on our beautiful, perfect world in tranquil isolation, or should we take our rightful place as the masters of the cosmos, shaping other worlds in our image, guiding the evolution of lesser species? The two factions were not enemies at first. They were brothers and sisters in debate. One side, led by the charismatic and brilliant Cygnus, believed in a future of expansion. They saw our power as a mandate, the duty to spread life and order throughout the stars. They believed in a new beginning, a great cosmic purpose that lay beyond our single planet. The other side, led by the stoic and wise Aura, argued for preservation. They believed our purpose was to protect our home, to be the guardians of our perfect, fragile peace, and to watch the cosmos with a humble eye. To them, to force our will on other worlds was to repeat the mistakes of a lesser, more primitive history. The debates grew heated. The philosophical divide deepened into an ideological chasm. Technology, once a tool for peace, began to be viewed through the lens of power. The artificers, once united, split into rival schools of thought. The keepers of the laws struggled to maintain objectivity as each side began to twist history to support their own future. The whispers of dissent grew louder, echoing through the crystalline halls. The elegant dance of Phobos and Deimos seemed to become more frenetic, a dark omen of the chaos to come. We did not know it then, but the seeds of our own destruction had been planted. Our forgotten homeland, so perfect and serene, was about to become the epicenter of a conflict that would tear a planet apart and change the fate of two worlds forever. This was the twilight before the dawn of a war that would erase our civilization from existence, leaving behind only dust, silence, and a few scattered echoes of our greatness. This was the quiet before the storm that would turn the blue-green jewel of Ares into the desolate red planet we know as Mars today. The Great War of the Gods. The schism began not with a bang, but with a whisper, a subtle, ideological poison that seeped into the crystalline heart of our Martian society. The philosophical debate between the two factions, the expansionists led by Cygnus and the preservationists guided by Aura, was no longer a matter of intellectual discourse. The two leaders, once respected mentors to a younger generation, now stood on opposite sides of a chasm that would soon swallow their world. Cygnus, a visionary with a mind as vast as the cosmos he yearned to explore, was a magnetic force. He spoke of destiny, of the right and obligation of the Martian people to seed the universe with life, to become the architects of new galaxies. To his followers, the preservationist desire to remain isolated on Ares was a form of spiritual cowardice, a betrayal of their own potential. They began to experiment with forbidden technologies, pushing the boundaries of what was safe and what was possible. Their laboratories, once centers of tranquil discovery, hummed with a new, aggressive energy, a hunger for power that would propel them to the stars by any means necessary. Their focus shifted to weapons, not for defense, but for cosmic conquest. Aura, a matriarch with a soul entwined with the very spirit of Ares, saw this ambition as a terminal illness. She and her followers, the preservationists, believed that their greatness lay not in expansion, but in being a perfect example of a society in harmony. They saw the expansionist drive as a primitive, ego-driven hunger, a repeat of the chaotic history they had worked so hard to transcend. They believed in protecting their homeworld, not just physically but spiritually. Their technologies were repurposed for defense energy shields that could deflect comets and biomantic weaponry that could pacify without destroying. They were defenders of the old way, a society that found perfection within its own borders. The first act of aggression was a betrayal. It happened not on a battlefield, but in the heart of our collective consciousness, the great neural network that stored our history and lore. A preservationist keeper of the lore, a follower of Aura, discovered that the expansionists had begun to subtly alter our historical records, erasing moments of planetary isolation and exaggerating tales of interspecies guidance from our ancient past. It was a silent war for the future, fought by rewriting the past. The Keeper was found deactivated a day later, their mind wiped clean, a casualty of the first skirmish. This act of treachery shattered the fragile peace. The preservationists retaliated by severing the expansionists' access to the planetary power grid, a move that crippled their burgeoning weapon labs. In response, the expansionists activated their own newly developed power source, a portable reactor that drew energy directly from a dimensional rift. This technology was unstable, dangerous, and a direct violation of the ancient codes of conduct. The open war erupted over the Mare Borealis. The expansionists launched their first fleet of solar skiffs, elegant, teardrop-shaped craft, armed with prototype plasma lances that could slice through mountains. They targeted the preservationists' great ocean-based cities, floating crystalline metropolises that shimmered on the surface of the Mare Borealis. The preservationists met them with their own fleet, shielded by powerful etheric grids that turned the plasma lances into harmless showers of light. The battles were a terrifying, silent spectacle, flashes of plasma against shimmering grids, and the thrum of gravity wells being manipulated to send skiffs careening into the icy moons. But the real war was not fought with physical weapons. It was a war of consciousness. Both sides used their mastery of mental and psychic abilities. The expansionists would attempt to infiltrate the minds of preservationist pilots, a form of psychic warfare that could turn a friend into a foe in an instant. The preservationists, in turn, would project calming frequencies and waves of empathy, attempting to bring a peaceful end to the conflict by reaching out to their opponents' higher selves. It was a brutal, beautiful, and ultimately pointless conflict. The war escalated with terrifying speed. The expansionists, in their blind pursuit of power, began to deploy weapons that violated every principle their society was built on. They unleashed quantum disruptors, devices that could tear apart the very molecular structure of a living city. They targeted the great crystalline spires, the sources of the preservationist power. The beautiful, glowing cities from our past became monuments of their own destruction, collapsing into dust and ruin. Rivers turned black with corrupted energy, and the blue sky began to show a reddish tint, a sign of the atmospheric damage that was beginning. Aura and her preservationists, seeing their world being consumed by the very ambition they feared, were forced to fight back with increasing ferocity. They had no desire to expand, but they were now in a desperate war for their very survival. They deployed geomantic displacements, activating fault lines and volcanic vents to cripple the expansionists' ground-based forces. The once stable Martian crust began to groan and shift. It was a battle between brothers, a war that was not about who would win, but who would be the last to survive. The war reached its peak when Cygnus, driven by a fanatical desire for victory, turned his attention to the core of the planet itself. He believed that if he could harness the immense power of Eris's crystalline heart, he could unleash a weapon that would not just defeat his enemies, but would give his people the ultimate power to reshape reality and expand into the cosmos. He ignored the warnings of his own scientists, who cautioned that such an act could be catastrophic. His ambition had become a madness. Aura and her people saw this final act for what it was, the ultimate betrayal. The expansionists had gone from seeking a new home to destroying the very concept of home itself. The preservationists launched a desperate final assault. their forces no longer fighting to win, but to prevent the unthinkable. They knew they could not defeat the enemy's final weapon, but they could try to stop it from being used. The last battle of the war was not fought in the air or on the ground. It was fought deep within the planet, a silent war of consciousness and will, with both sides vying for control of the planet's heart. The ground shook with unprecedented force. The Mare Borealis began to boil. The sky turned from blue to a sickly, mottled orange and red as the atmosphere began to unravel. Both sides were so consumed by their conflict, so blind to the destruction they were causing, that they failed to realize they had already lost. They had sacrificed their perfect world for an ideal that was already turning to ash. This was the war of the gods, and it would end with the gods themselves becoming the instruments of their own oblivion. The stage was now set for the final catastrophic act that would forever change the face of Mars and pave the way for a new dawn on a distant blue world. Ancient texts that describe space battles, the victors write the history. But what happens when the victor is an act of oblivion, a cataclysm so absolute that it erases itself from existence? The memory of our great war on Ares, our beautiful forgotten homeland, did not vanish completely. It was not written down in scrolls or carved in stone by the Martians who witnessed it, for there were none left to do so. Instead, the memories were carried. They were carried in the minds of the few survivors who fled, and they were carried in the very air, in the cosmic dust and energy that drifted to a young, chaotic planet called Earth. To the fledgling human civilizations, a story of an advanced race fighting a devastating war in the heavens would be incomprehensible. The only language they had for such a spectacle was a language of myth, of gods and demons, of divine wrath and cosmic power. And so, our history, our tragedy, became their folklore. Let us begin with the Vimanas of the ancient Indian epic, the Mahabharata. For centuries, scholars have marveled at the descriptions of flying palaces and aerial chariots capable of incredible speed and devastation. They were not chariots, they were not palaces, they were the last great fleets of our two factions, the solar skiffs of Cygnus and the etheric grids of Aura. The epic speaks of King Salva attacking the city of Dvaraka with a flying contraption called the Sauba, a vessel that could become invisible and defy all laws of physics. This was not a god's trick. It was a quantum cloaking device, a technology the expansionists had developed to ambush their enemies. When Krishna used his Sudarshana chakra, a spinning disk of immense power, to destroy the Sauba, he was not a deity wielding a divine weapon. He was a human, guided by a survivor, given a piece of advanced Martian technology that could disrupt the quantum cloak and deliver a powerful energy blow. The war we fought was so destructive that its echoes, its scattered energy signatures, were still a part of the cosmos, waiting for a hand, human or otherwise, to wield them. But the most terrifying passage is the description of the Brahmastra. The Mahabharata speaks of a single weapon that, when unleashed, caused a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and fire, as brilliant as 10,000 suns, rose in all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death, which reduced to ashes the entire race of Vrishnis and Andakas. The corpses were so burned as to be unrecognizable. The hair and nails fell out. Pottery broke without apparent cause, and the birds turned white. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. This is not a description of divine magic. It is a terrifyingly accurate account of a nuclear or quantum weapon. It is a description of the type of device Cygnus sought to control, the final desperate act that was about to unfold on Ares. The survivors of that weapon, who may have been brought to Earth, would have passed down this harrowing memory, a warning of cosmic fire and radiation sickness that became a story of divine retribution. Now, let us turn to the Fertile Crescent, the cradle of Earth civilization, and the cuneiform tablets of the ancient Sumerians. Here, we find the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. To the Sumerians, these were their creators and gods, powerful beings who descended from the heavens. But their story is filled with conflict. There is the tale of the great battle between the gods, particularly the rivalry between Enlil and Enki. Enlil, the lord of the air and commander of the sky, was a strict, authoritarian figure who believed in order and dominion. Enki, the lord of wisdom and fresh water, was a more compassionate figure, often siding with humanity and the preservation of life. Their struggle is often portrayed as a divine squabble, but when viewed through our lens, it becomes something else entirely. Enlil and Enki were not gods. They were the leaders of the two Martian factions, their characters and conflicts mirroring Cygnus's quest for cosmic dominion and Aura's desire for peaceful preservation. The battles described in the tablets, with gods fighting gods in the sky and using fire from the heavens, were the distorted, simplified accounts of our Martian war. The Anunnaki were not divine beings from another galaxy. They were the Martian survivors, now seen as gods by the new species they had found. Even in Egyptian mythology, the whispers of our war can be found. The story of Horus and Set is a classic battle of good versus evil, order versus chaos. Horus, the sky god, and Set, the god of deserts and storms, fought a long, brutal war for control of the earth. Their battles were fought in the air, with Horus's solar boat a perfect allegory for a starship and Set's flying vessel. The survivors, having found refuge on Earth, brought their schism with them. The followers of Cygnus, now seen as the chaotic and destructive force of Set, and the followers of Aura, now seen as the righteous and preserving force of Horus, continued their war in a new primitive context. The conflict they had on Ares, which had been fought with plasma lances and quantum disruptors, was now fought with spears and arrows, with human armies as their pawns. The myths are not just stories of gods, they are the battle plans, the ideologies, and the personal dramas of a refugee race, replayed for a new audience. The evidence is not just in these epic texts, it's global. It's in the Greek myth of the Titanomachy, where a younger generation of gods battles the older titans in a cosmic war. It's in the Norse myth of Ragnarok, where the gods and monsters of the world engage in a final destructive battle. It's in every ancient culture that speaks of sky people, fire from the heavens, and gods who walk among men, teaching them the secrets of agriculture and astronomy. These were not coincidences. These were the echoes of a single monumental event that reverberated across the solar system, our war, our destruction, and our flight to a new home. We have been taught to see these stories as charming fables, as primitive humanity's attempt to explain the unexplainable. But what if they are something else entirely? What if they are the most accurate historical records we possess? What if they are the true, albeit distorted, memories of our species? What if our gods were not supernatural entities, but simply the last survivors of a magnificent, doomed civilization who, in their final act of self-destruction, became the accidental fathers of a new one? These ancient texts are not just dusty old stories. They are the forbidden history of our true origin, a history that has been hidden in plain sight for 12,000 years. The destruction of Mars's atmosphere, the final battle, did not rage on the surface, but in the heart of our world, deep within the planet's mantle, where the great crystalline core hummed with the life-giving energy that had sustained us for millennia. The last stand was made. The preservationists, led by the steadfast Aura, had mustered every remaining force in a desperate attempt to stop Cygnus and his expansionists from activating their ultimate forbidden device. It was a weapon of unholy ambition, designed not for conquest, but for the fundamental manipulation of reality itself. Cygnus believed that by rerouting the planet's very magnetic field, he could create a power source of infinite magnitude, a singularity of energy that would propel his fleet of starships to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, turning his followers into true gods of the cosmos. Aura's forces arrived to find the core's chamber already in a state of chaotic flux. The expansionist engineers, blinded by their leader's vision, had overridden all safety protocols. The crystalline core, once a source of gentle, life-sustaining energy, was now screaming, a resonant frequency of pain and protest that shook the planet from within. The very ground, the rock we had once called our brother, was convulsing. As Aura's final message broadcast across the now flickering communication network, her voice was one of profound sadness, not of triumph. He has gone too far. He will consume us all to reach a heaven that does not exist. We cannot stop him. We can only mourn. And then it began. Cygnus activated the device. There was no explosion, no thunderous detonation. Instead, the entire planet seemed to hold its breath. For one agonizing cosmic second, the hum of the core went silent. The stars, which had been a part of our nightly existence for eons, flickered out. Then, with a soundless, terrifying pop, the planet's magnetic field, our shield, our protective skin, our very soul shattered. It did not just weaken, it evaporated, torn apart by a fundamental misunderstanding of the cosmic forces it was meant to manipulate. The force that held our atmosphere in place, that protected us from the solar wind, was gone. Up above, in what had been our cerulean sky, a monstrous, silent storm began. The solar wind, a relentless torrent of charged particles and high-energy radiation, hit the atmosphere with the force of a cosmic tsunami. Our beautiful blue air didn't just disappear. It was ripped away, molecule by molecule, in a process so fast it was like watching a ghost dissolve. The atmosphere, once thick enough to sustain oceans, to cushion us in a gentle embrace, began to boil away into the dark void. On the surface, the effect was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The Mare Borealis, our great northern ocean, began to flash freeze, not from a drop in temperature, but from the sudden, violent vacuum of the atmosphere disappearing. The water boiled and froze at the same time, turning into a vast, swirling cloud of ice particles that blanketed the northern plains in a fine white powder. The rushing rivers in Valles Marineras choked and became torrents of slush, freezing solid in an instant. The air, once thick enough to carry the sound of our living cities, thinned so quickly that all sound became a strained, muffled gasp. The radiation was next. With no atmosphere to protect us, the sun's rays, no longer filtered, became a searing, white-hot blaze of cosmic fire. The ground we stood on became a sterile, radiated wasteland. Our beautiful bioluminescent cities, grown from the very rock of the planet, began to wither and die, their crystalline structures crumbling into dust under the sudden, unfiltered onslaught of cosmic rays. Our cities, which had once reached for the heavens, now turned to glass and sand. As the catastrophe unfolded, a few thousand souls, the last remnants of our once great civilization, were in the middle of a desperate, futile evacuation. In their last moments, they weren't battling their enemies. They were trying to save what little life remained, but it was a losing battle. A small fleet of preservationist ships, already damaged and limping from the war, had managed to lift off from the planetary surface just as the magnetic field gave way. They watched in horror as the sky of their homeworld went from blue to red and then to a thin violet haze as the last of the atmosphere was stripped away. From the observation deck of the lead vessel, a woman named Ilara, a master artificer and one of Aura's most trusted lieutenants, stared at the planet she was born on. The red dust storms, which would become the defining feature of Mars for millennia to come, had just begun. The once clear winds, which had carried the scents of ancient crystalline gardens, were now a constant, raging vortex of rusty dust, stirred up by the last, frantic death throes of a planet being scoured clean. She could see the great scars on the planet's surface, the gaping canyons and deep fissures that the final seismic convulsions had left. She could even see, faintly, the twisted, unrecognizable wreckage of Cygnus's great fleet, all of it turned to slag and dust, a testament to an ambition that had consumed itself. Her home, Ares, was dead. It was no longer a beautiful living world. It was a barren rock, a tombstone, floating in the cosmic void. Its heart, its soul, its very essence had been ripped from it. The magnificent civilization that had once reigned supreme was now a few thousand frightened souls in a small fleet of battered ships, refugees from a tragedy of their own making. They looked back at their forgotten homeland, a blood-red orb in the blackness, and knew that they were the last keepers of a secret that the universe was trying to erase. Their destination was Earth, but they were not gods coming to rule. They were ghosts coming to hide, to survive, and to pass on the fragmented, terrifying memories of a war that had turned a vibrant world into a cosmic cemetery. They had lost everything, and they had one last chance to save something: their knowledge, their history, and the hope of a new beginning on a new world. The journey had just begun. Migration to Earth, the last refuge. The journey was not one of hope, but of profound, aching grief. The fleet was not a triumphant armada, but a collection of bruised, limping vessels, the last scraps of a civilization that had just committed suicide. The largest of them, a majestic vessel known as the Aura's Aegis, was the ark that carried the remnants of the preservationists. Its crystalline hull, once a shimmering testament to our mastery of energy, was now dull and scarred, a monument to the war that had consumed us. Within its silent halls, the survivors were ghosts in their own home. Among them was Elara, a master artificer, and now, by default, the leader of this refugee fleet. Her command was not a position of power, but a burden of sorrow. She would spend her days in the bridge, her eyes fixed on the view screen, which displayed a distant, shrinking dot of red dust, our dead planet, Eris. She watched as it receded into the cosmic void, a scar on the face of the solar system, a constant reminder of the hubris and madness that had led them here. The silence on the bridge was deafening, a stark contrast to the cacophony of their past life. There were no joyous reunions, no shared meals, just the shared, unspoken trauma of what they had witnessed. The journey itself was a long, slow bleed. The ark was a biosphere, but a fragile one. Every day was a battle against entropy. The life support systems, never designed for this kind of extended interstellar travel, had to be constantly repaired and recalibrated. Their food synthesizers, once capable of creating any sustenance from raw energy, were now sputtering and unreliable. They had to ration the very memory of their past, focusing all their dwindling resources on the hope of a future. But what kept them going was not technology. It was a strange, subtle hum, a cosmic frequency that was a constant presence in the background of their navigation systems. It was a signal, a kind of beacon, not from another civilization, but from the universe itself. It was almost as if Ares, in its final death throes, had sent out a final, agonizing pulse that had been picked up by a kindred spirit. This signal pointed them directly to Earth. It was an anomaly, something that should not exist, a resonance that seemed to speak of a long-forgotten genetic connection between the two planets. Elara began to call it the Echo, a sound that was both a memory and a promise. For 2 years they drifted through the cosmic dark, a voyage of silent desperation. Their ships became floating sarcophagi of a dead culture, and the survivors, now a pale shadow of their former selves, had to confront the most profound question of all. What were they now? They were no longer Martians, for their home was gone. They were not human, they were nothing, and yet they were everything: the lost hope, the lost memory of a civilization that had reached for the stars and in doing so had fallen. Then one day, the echo grew stronger. It sang not of sorrow, but of vibrant, chaotic life. The view screen, once filled with the empty void, began to show a new world, and it was blue. Not the sterile, cerulean blue of their forgotten past, but a living, breathing, tumultuous blue, the blue of vast oceans and a thick, thriving atmosphere. This was Earth. The arrival was fraught with danger. The ships, massive and unwieldy, were not meant for atmospheric entry. The friction and heat threatened to tear them apart. Ilara, a master of a technology that was now little more than magic, had to guide them in, a monumental task of precision and will. They landed not in the midst of a thriving civilization, but in a remote, desolate corner of the planet, what would one day be known as the Near East, a region of dry riverbeds and ancient, forgotten mountains. Their ships, with a groaning sigh of finality, settled into the dust of a world that was both a refuge and a prison. And then they saw them, the humans. They were a small, nomadic tribe. Their skin was dark, their faces etched with the lines of hard living, their bodies clad in the crudest of animal skins. They were not primitive, they were young. They lived in a world of raw nature, a world where survival was a constant struggle and knowledge was passed down through grunts and crude drawings. They stared at the ark ships, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. To them, these were not machines. These were mountains that had fallen from the sky, great silent gods that had descended to their world. Ilara and her council had a deep, bitter debate. The preservationist's entire philosophy was about non-interference, about letting life find its own path. But now, they were not observers. They were refugees. They were a few hundred souls clinging to survival on a world that was not their own. They had to make a choice. Should they remain hidden, living out their lives in their ark ships, watching the new species grow, or should they intervene, use their vast but now limited knowledge to give these people a head start, to build a new civilization from the ashes of their own? One of the oldest among them, a philosopher named Orion, made the final profound point. We are not gods, we are survivors, but to them we will be gods. And perhaps that is the role we must play, not to be their masters, but to be their teachers. We have seen what happens when power is corrupted. We have seen what happens when technology is used for destruction. Let us not repeat the mistakes of our past. Let us be the gods they need, the ones who teach them to build, not to destroy. And so the decision was made. They would descend. They would walk among the primitive humans, their advanced technology and knowledge appearing as magic, their purpose a noble one, to guide, to teach, and to ensure that this new civilization, this new hope, did not repeat the mistakes of the old. The journey from Mars to Earth was over, but the true hidden history of humanity was about to begin. The survivors, the last ghosts of Ares, were about to become the gods of the Sumerians, the Egyptians, and the people of the Indus Valley. They were about to take on the most difficult role of all, to become the architects of a civilization that they themselves would have to one day forget. The hidden Mars-Earth connection in ancient temples. The first few centuries on Earth were a time of silent, painstaking work for the survivors of Ares. The humans, our new neighbors, were a young species capable of great ingenuity but still living in a primal world, their lives a constant struggle against nature. For us, the last Martians, it was a time of immense challenge and profound responsibility. Our goal was not to rule but to guide. We knew that to build a new civilization from the ashes of our own, we had to start with a foundation of order, knowledge, and purpose. And so we began to build our memories into their world, our technology becoming their mythology, our sorrow becoming their sacred monuments. Our first great task was to establish a global presence, a network of centers from which to teach. We chose locations not at random, but based on Earth's own inherent energy grid, a geomantic map of ley lines and natural power sources that mirrored the one we had used to power our cities on Ares. The humans saw us land in our skyships, and they worshipped us as gods. They called us the Watchers, the Shining Ones. We did not correct them. It was easier to be gods than to explain the unimaginable. The oldest of our great projects, one that speaks volumes about our purpose, is the site you now know as Göbekli Tepe. While modern archaeology dates it to over 12,000 years ago, placing its construction precisely at the time of the Younger Dryas cataclysm. They have no explanation for its complexity. They see it as a hunter-gatherer society building a sophisticated stone temple. They are wrong. Göbekli Tepe was not a temple, it was our first classroom. It was a teaching center where we, the survivors, began the slow, arduous process of jump-starting human civilization. The massive T-shaped pillars were not abstract totems. They were a coded library of our cosmic knowledge, their carvings of animals and celestial phenomena, a primitive universal language designed to teach the early humans the basic principles of astronomy, zoology, and geometry. The concentric stone circles were not just religious sanctuaries. They were astronomical calculators, aligned to the stars and the seasons, a physical embodiment of the knowledge we needed to impart to these new beings to transition them from a nomadic lifestyle to an agrarian one. The site was a message board, a monument to our past, and a blueprint for their future. But our most ambitious project, the one that holds the most profound connection to our past, is the complex you now call the Great Pyramids of Giza. Modern science struggles to explain their impossible precision, their alignment to the cardinal directions, and their perfect geometry. This is because they are not tombs. They were never meant to be tombs. The Great Pyramids were geomantic resonance chambers, built to tap into and stabilize Earth's planetary energy grid, just as our cities had done on Ares. We built them with a mastery of sound and vibration that made the massive stones weightless. The inner passages were not for burying pharaohs, but for channeling energy. And the king's chamber was not a burial vault, but a resonance cavity, its granite walls and perfect dimensions, designed to generate a powerful harmonic frequency. The entire complex was a power plant, a beacon, and a map. The three Great Pyramids, now thought to represent the stars of Orion's belt, were also a mirror image of the three major starports of our lost civilization on Mars. Their alignment to Orion was not a coincidence. It was a memorial, a final monument to the constellation we saw every night from our home, a constant cosmic reminder of the world we had lost. And the Great Sphinx? It was not a statue of a mythical creature. It was a monument to our home, a testament to the creatures that once roamed our world. With the body of a lion and the head of a human, it was a subtle, coded message to a future that might one day understand. The Sphinx does not just watch the horizon. Its eyes are fixed on the point where Mars, our forgotten homeland, would rise on the spring equinox of a bygone era. It is a monument of sorrow, of silent observation, and a permanent, unshakable connection to the world we had to leave behind. Far from the Egyptian deserts, across a great ocean, we built another monument to the stars, Stonehenge. It was not a religious site for sacrificing druids. It was a celestial supercomputer, a calendar of immense complexity, designed to teach the early Europeans the precise movements of the sun, moon, and stars. We constructed it with our knowledge of gravitational manipulation, with stones brought from hundreds of miles away as a testament to the power we possessed, but were now using for peace. The purpose was simple: to give humanity the tools to understand their world, to track the seasons, to predict the future, and to build a stable, agrarian society. Every stone was placed with a purpose, every alignment a lesson in cosmic geometry, a direct transfer of our knowledge. All of these ancient temples and structures, from the massive blocks of Pumapunku to the intricate designs of the Mayan pyramids, are not scattered, random ruins. They are a single interconnected network of sites, a global energy grid, a final map of our lost world. They are the fingerprints of a refugee race, the last remnants of a civilization that had to build a new world from scratch. They are the memory of Ares, a ghost civilization written in stone, meant to lie dormant until a time when humanity was finally advanced enough to read its true history, to understand that the stories of gods and flying chariots were not just myths, but fragments of their own forgotten past, the technology they brought with them. The challenge was not to survive, but to teach without destroying. We, the last survivors of Ares, carried in our minds and on our few remaining vessels, a store of knowledge that could either save this new world or condemn it to the same fate as our own. We had seen firsthand what happened when advanced technology was given to an underdeveloped consciousness. The lessons of the Great War, the searing image of our planet's atmosphere being stripped away, were etched not just in our memory but in our very souls. Our purpose was clear: to uplift humanity, but to do so slowly, carefully, and selectively. We would give them the tools to build, but never the tools to destroy. The humans saw our ships as chariots of the gods, and our tools as sacred artifacts. They had no language for what we were doing, so they named it with the only words they knew: magic, miracles, divine gifts. We allowed them to believe, for it was the safest path. One of the first technologies we shared was our understanding of geomantic energy and resonance. Our civilization on Ares was powered by this knowledge, a subtle art of communicating with the planet's own energy grid. We did not build power plants that burned or polluted. We built structures that resonated with the planet's core, drawing on its natural, limitless energy. This is the secret behind the impossible construction of the pyramids and other massive stone monuments. To the early humans, the sight of us using a resonant frequency to levitate and position a 70-ton stone would have seemed like an act of divine will. But it was just applied physics. We showed them how to find these ley lines, how to carve their temples and monuments to align with these energy grids, creating places of power and healing. This knowledge, passed down in fragmented form, became the foundation of early architecture and sacred geometry. We also brought with us an advanced understanding of metallurgy and materials science. The steel swords described in ancient Indian myths, said to never rust or dull, were not forged in fire and iron. They were grown using a process we called crystalline integration, where we used sonic frequencies and a controlled energy field to arrange a metal's molecular structure into a perfect lattice. The result was a material that was lighter than air, stronger than any terrestrial substance, and completely incorruptible. We taught them the basics of smelting and forging, giving them a monumental leap from the Stone Age to the Bronze and Iron Ages. But the true advanced knowledge of crystalline integration was kept hidden, a secret that could only be shared when humanity was ready. The myths of gods forging tools in a fiery forge was simply a crude human interpretation of a process they could not understand. Our greatest gift, and perhaps the one with the most lasting impact, was our knowledge of advanced biology and genetics. The Younger Dryas cataclysm had left humanity on the brink. We found them as small nomadic tribes, their lives a constant struggle for survival. We taught them the secrets of agriculture and organized society, but we did more than just teach them to plant seeds. We taught them the basic principles of genetic selection and crop engineering, subtly guiding them to cultivate more resilient grains and create a reliable food supply. The myths of gods bringing civilization to mankind, teaching them to farm and build cities, were not allegories. They were our story. We brought with us medical technology that could heal wounds in seconds and cure diseases that were wiping out entire tribes. We could even manipulate the genetic code to heal birth defects. To the humans, a broken bone mending in an instant or a plague being swept away by a touch was proof of our divinity. They worshipped us as healers, as gods who could bring life back from the brink of death. And of course, there were the flying machines, the vimanas of the Indian epics, and the chariots of the gods. Our ships, the same vessels we used to escape the dying Ares, were powered by etheric propulsion, a technology that harnessed the raw energy of the cosmic ether. They did not fly on wings or with rockets. They bent space and time, gliding through the air as if they were thoughts made manifest. We used them sparingly, only for long-distance travel and to survey the planet, but their presence was enough to cement our image as sky gods. The tales of gods flying between the stars and raining down fire from the heavens were not fables. They were fragmented memories of our ships in the final battles of the Martian War, a memory that would one day haunt humanity's collective consciousness. As the years turned into centuries, we saw the early human civilizations grow under our careful guidance. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the people of the Indus Valley, all of them were built on the foundation of our technology and our knowledge. But we were always careful. We kept the most destructive secrets, the quantum disruptors, the plasma lances, the reality bending technology locked away in our ships, buried deep beneath the earth in what would one day become ancient, forgotten crypts. We gave him just enough to build a civilization, but not enough to repeat the mistakes of the past. Our mission was not to replicate our old world, but to create a new one that would never know the pain of self-destruction. And so the technology we brought with us became the stuff of legend, a ghost in the machine of human history, waiting for the day when humanity would finally be ready to understand the true source of its divine gifts, the survivors who became our gods. The transition from survivors to gods was a burden we did not ask for, a role we were forced to play on a stage not of our own making. For us, the last Martians, it was a slow, painful surrender of our true identity. We were a broken people, haunted by the screams of our dying world, but to the early humans, we were miracles. They saw our ships as chariots of light, our advanced healing technology as divine touch, and our geomantic science as unexplainable magic. They did not have the vocabulary for what we were, so they used the only word that came close, gods. And we, in our sorrow and our responsibility, accepted the title. Ilara, now seen as a figure of incredible wisdom and power, was known in the nascent Egyptian civilization as Isis, the great enchantress. The humans marveled at her ability to heal the sick, to teach them the secrets of agriculture and mathematics, and to bring order to their chaotic lives. But for Ilara, every act of divine teaching was a bittersweet reminder of the knowledge that had destroyed her home. She was not a goddess. She was a refugee, a mentor with the heaviest burden of all, to guide a new species without allowing them to replicate the mistakes of her own. Her partner, a skilled artificer, became Osiris, the wise king who taught humanity to farm, to build cities, and to understand the cycles of life and death. The mythical death and resurrection of Osiris was not a supernatural event. It was the story of an advanced medical procedure, a desperate act of science that we performed to save one of our own, which to the humans appeared as the triumph of life over death. In the ancient Sumerian lands, the divisions that had once separated our society on Ares took on a new mythological form. The preservationists, who valued order, civilization, and the peaceful pursuit of knowledge, were remembered as the benevolent Anunnaki figures like Enki, the Lord of wisdom and fresh water who guided humanity toward living in harmony with the world. Meanwhile, the expansionist perspective, driven by a desire for power and change, also found its representation. The remaining expansionists, holding on to their technology and ideals, were seen as figures like Enlil, the storm god, a powerful deity associated with storms and challenges, who demanded respect and was linked to great floods and hardships. The conflicts described in Sumerian mythology can be viewed not as distant celestial battles, but as symbolic reflections of our own past struggles, with humanity caught in the middle of these ongoing ideological tensions. Our longevity, a gift of our advanced biology, was also a source of their worship. We were not immortal, but our lives stretched across millennia. A single Martian could live to see entire generations of humans born, grow old, and die. To the humans, this was proof of our divinity. They saw a figure like Thoth, the Egyptian god of writing and knowledge, as a timeless being when in reality he was a member of our Keeper of the Laura caste, a historian tasked with the long-term project of building a new civilization. We watched their lives, short and vibrant, and it filled us with a sense of both awe and profound loneliness. We were like ancient trees, watching the fleeting butterflies of their lives flit by. Our wisdom was a consequence of time, not a divine gift. But this divine status came with its own dangers. Some of us, broken by the trauma of our past, began to believe the myths. They saw the humans' worship not as a misinterpretation, but as a validation of their own superiority. They began to demand sacrifices, to abuse their power, and to manipulate humanity for their own selfish ends. This led to a new internal schism among the survivors. The majority of us, led by Alara, had to confront and contain our own people who had been corrupted by the very power they were trying to wield for good. This internal conflict became the basis for mythological stories of gods battling demons, of divine figures being cast down from the heavens for their transgressions. Ultimately, we knew our presence was unsustainable. Humanity was growing, becoming more intelligent, more curious, and more independent. Our role as gods was a crutch, and to truly let this new civilization flourish, we had to let them stand on their own. We began to withdraw one by one to our last hidden outposts and to the vast secret halls buried beneath the planet's surface. We created the myth of the ascension, the idea of gods returning to the heavens, when in reality, we were simply leaving. We sealed our remaining technologies in ancient crypts, our starships buried beneath the desert sands, and our knowledge locked away in the collective consciousness of our remaining keepers. We left them with the tools of civilization, agriculture, writing, law, but we took with us the final dangerous knowledge of our own destruction, and so we became ghosts in our own story. We became the gods who left, the divine beings who gave humanity everything and then vanished into the sky. We left behind a legacy of magnificent monuments, of impossibly advanced knowledge, and of myths that would haunt humanity for 12,000 years. The reason our history is so hard to find is that it was a history we had to erase ourselves, a necessary deception to ensure that this new, vibrant, chaotic, and beautiful world we had helped create would never have to pay the ultimate price for the truth. Why mainstream science ignores this theory: the greatest conspiracy is not a grand secret plot. It is a consensus. It is a carefully curated and meticulously maintained version of reality that, for various reasons, must be protected at all costs. The history you were taught in school, the timeline that places primitive hunter-gatherers at the time of the Younger Dryas, is not a complete picture. It is a beautifully crafted narrative with a few inconvenient truths swept neatly under the rug. This is because the survivors of Ares, the very beings who became our gods, knew that humanity could not handle the full truth. Their greatest deception was not in what they taught us, but in what they allowed us to forget. The suppression of this knowledge began with them. As humanity grew and began to walk on its own, we, the last Martians, began our slow, systematic retreat. We intentionally left a history that was fragmented, easily misinterpreted, and so fantastical that any rational future civilization would dismiss it as a myth. We buried our ships deep beneath the desert sands, wiped our most dangerous technologies from the annals of our new history, and left behind only cryptic clues in stone and myth. Our goal was not to hide our history forever, but to hide it until a time when humanity was spiritually and psychologically mature enough to handle the truth. But what we didn't foresee was the establishment of a scientific orthodoxy that would become more rigid than our own. Today, the suppression of this theory is not the work of a secret cabal in black suits, but of an entire academic and scientific establishment dedicated to a single, unbending paradigm. Think about the evidence. The Great Pyramids of Giza. The academic consensus insists they are tombs for pharaohs. This explanation, while simple and neat, has massive holes in it. No pharaoh was ever found entombed within the king's chamber, and the sheer scale and astronomical precision of their construction defy explanation without a profound understanding of physics and engineering that a Bronze Age civilization simply did not possess. To accept our theory that they were geomantic power plants built by an advanced civilization would mean rewriting the entire history of Egyptology, a field that has been built on a false premise for centuries. The careers, the books, the entire institutional framework of Egyptology would crumble. So instead, any evidence to the contrary is simply dismissed as unexplained, a ritual, or an unproven theory. Consider Göbekli Tepe. When it was discovered, it completely shattered the academic timeline. How could hunter-gatherers, living at the end of the last ice age, have the social organization and the technological know-how to build such a sophisticated stone temple? The scientific community was forced to concede that our timeline of human civilization needed to be pushed back. But they did not ask the most obvious question: who helped them? Instead, they created a new, equally unprovable theory that these hunter-gatherers, for some unexplained reason, decided to come together and build a massive ceremonial site. To admit that the site was a school built by extraterrestrial survivors would mean rewriting not just history, but our understanding of human evolution itself. The reason these theories are ignored is because of a collective fear of the unknown. The scientific method is built on a foundation of skepticism and provable facts. It is not designed to handle a truth that is built on myth and legend. Any scientist who dares to present the idea of a Martian origin for humanity faces ridicule, professional ostracization, and a complete lack of funding. The peer review system, the supposed gatekeeper of scientific truth, becomes a tool for suppression, rejecting any paper that challenges the established narrative. The media, which is largely dependent on the academic community for its information, will not give a platform to such theories, branding them as conspiracy theories and pseudoscience. This is not a malicious conspiracy in the traditional sense. It is a system built on inertia, on the human need for order and stability. Our scientific history is a grand, beautiful story, a narrative of humanity pulling itself up by its own bootstraps, slowly evolving from primitive apes to a spacefaring civilization. It is a story that gives us pride and a sense of linear progress. To insert the truth that we were given a jump start by a doomed alien race would not only be a shattering blow to our ego, but it would also force us to confront the fact that we inherited our civilization from a people who were, at their core, flawed, arrogant, and self-destructive. The truth is hidden in plain sight. It is in the hieroglyphs that show flying machines, in the epic poems that describe battles in the heavens, in the precise alignments of the pyramids to the constellations of our forgotten homeland. Mainstream science ignores this theory, not because the evidence isn't there, but because the truth is too large, too profound, and too terrifying for a civilization that is still, in many ways, just learning to walk. The biggest conspiracy of all is the one that allows us to believe we did it all ourselves. Could we be going back home soon? For 12,000 years, we have looked up at the night sky and seen a red star, a small distant light in the cosmic dark. We gave it the name of our war god Mars in a fit of cosmic irony. We have built telescopes to peer at its desolate surface, sent rovers to crawl across its rusty plains, and dreamed of one day setting foot on its soil. But what if our obsession with Mars is not a scientific curiosity? What if our relentless drive to return to the red planet is not a journey to a new world, but a homecoming? What if the collective consciousness of humanity, in its quest to find a new home, is actually being driven by a profound subconscious memory, an ancient genetic echo from the cradle of our civilization? The Martian survivors, in their great act of deception, left us a legacy of myth and monument, but they left us something else as well, something they could not erase or hide. They left us a genetic echo, a whisper in our DNA that has been passed down through generations. A tiny, almost imperceptible piece of their biological and psychological makeup that, for 12 millennia, has been a dormant code, waiting for the right conditions to activate. That code is now active. It is what fuels our modern space race, our fascination with a dead red world. It is the reason that companies like SpaceX and agencies like NASA are so singularly focused on the colonization of Mars, we are not just exploring the cosmos. We are subconsciously trying to return to the home of our ancestors. Look at our current ambitions. We are obsessed with finding water on Mars. The rovers are tireless in their search, drilling into the subsurface, mapping the polar ice caps, and searching for any sign of liquid water that could sustain a colony. But what if this is not a search for water, but a deep ancestral yearning for the vast blue oceans of our forgotten homeland? What if we are looking for the mare borealis of our past, the oceans that were flash frozen and turned to dust by our ancestors' hubris? Our scientific quest to find a resource is, at its core, a psychological need to restore the lost beauty of our original home. And then there is the concept of terraforming, the idea of giving Mars a new atmosphere, of creating new oceans, and of making it a blue, living planet again is considered science fiction. But for us, the descendants of the last Martians, it feels like an act of profound and necessary repentance. It is a deep psychological need to heal the wound our ancestors inflicted on their world. We are not just looking to build a new home, we are looking to fix the one we broke. We want to repair the very crime that gave our new civilization its start. It is a cosmic scale act of atonement, a collective project driven by a memory we didn't even know we had.